Star Wars, something that we all know and love, from epic space battles, epic ground battles, epic romance, and epic plot. But outside of the films, there's a much larger story to be told, and that story is the Galactic Civil War. Now, you may be thinking, the Galactic Civil War, isn't that just the first 3 movies? Ha! Absolutely not. We are talking about the whole war, and the whole war doesn't last 3 movies. It lasted 22 freaking years. Now, for clarification, in this video, we will be discussing the Legends timeline of the Galactic Civil War, which is separate from the now established canon. This material is based off of the previous expanded universe material that existed before Disney retconned it back in 2014. As for my research, most of my sources are from Wikipedia, and I'm not going to be able to include everything due to the size of the war and everything involved with it. But let's not waste any time, and without further ado, I present to you the complete Star Wars Legends Galactic Civil War timeline! The Galactic Civil War's origins are traced back to the rise of the Galactic Empire, when Sheev Palpatine finally executed a decade-long plan to take over the galaxy. At the end of the Clone Wars, he executed Order 66, killed mostly all the Jedi, and declared himself Emperor, thanks to the help of his new apprentice Darth Vader. Thus began Palpatine's authoritarian regime, where he essentially became Space Hitler. Once the Galactic Empire was established, imperialization began throughout the galaxy. The Senate was now the Imperial Senate, which was just a fun little way to make those part of it think they had power in the Empire, in which they did not. Most of the senators thought, yeah, man, Galactic Empire, all one big happy family, peace and love, they'll protect the galaxy. Yeah, right. That empire just stole your newborn to become a stormtrooper that's gonna get killed by a farm boy 20 years down the line. Although some of these senators were not as foolish as others, such as Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, they were afraid to act too quickly against Palpatine, for any sense of dissent would be met with swift defeat. They instead held secret meetings at Cantham House on Coruscant. These meetings would eventually evolve into the Alliance to restore the Republic, or better known as the Rebel Alliance. The Empire, on the other hand, was starting to become a little more ballsy with their motives by activating human supremacy, with more humanocentric policies. Species like the Wookiees, Mon Calamari, and the Lurians were reclassified as non-sentient and subjected to slavery. The Empire was pretty much willing to do anything to make sure they stayed in power. A great example of this would be the Gorman Massacre, where citizens of the planet Gorman were protesting high taxation on an Imperial landing pad. Wilhuff Tarkin landed an entire Imperial warship on the protesters, killing pretty much all of them. State-sponsored terrorism soon became the Empire's main submission tactic, thanks to the Tarkin Doctrine, also known as the Doctrine of Terror, aka Rule of Fear, aka Imperial Communique number 001.044.92V. Engagements like the Quaimar suppressions put planets in their place, as well as the construction of the Death Star. Let the galaxy know who's boss. During this time, Darth Vader also thought it would be a good idea to have an apprentice. So he went to Kashyyyk, killed an old Jedi, stole his kid, named Galen Marek, better known later as Starkiller, and began to train him in the ways of the Sith. Soon the kid grew up and did some of Vader's bidding by killing various survivors of Order 66. But once Palpatine found out about Starkiller, he ordered Vader to kill him. Vader pretty much did that successfully, but then Palpatine kinda changed his mind and wanted to use Starkiller for the Empire again. They ultimately used him as an unwitting double agent. Starkiller caught on eventually and teamed up with Ram Koda to rescue Leia and Bail Organa on separate missions to fight back against the Empire. Galen Marek and the Senators wrote up the Corellian Treaty with other rebel organizations, officially declaring war on the Galactic Empire. But boom! Darth Vader and the other Imperial forces raided the meeting in a big gotcha moment. Galen Marek then sacrificed himself so the rebellion could live on, and Organa and company escaped. Then the war would last 2 decades and see the loss of billions and billions of lives. Hell yeah! Following the signing of the Corellian Treaty, the new alliance's leaders made a public declaration of rebellion in 2BBY, which stands for Before the Battle of Yavin. The Empire scoffed it off as a new era of separatists. They called these new worlds defecting from the Empire Succession Worlds. Most were met with swift annihilation that made any public attempt at a revolt. Mon Mothma, Garm Bel Iblis, and Bail Organa were unsure of how to approach the war because of this. They were way too weak to make any symbolic symbolic strikes, but if they didn't act fast, the other Alliance worlds would start to get agitated. The first real symbolic victory for the rebellion came with the rescue of Gael Akbar in the Ariadu system, who would later become the most prolific naval commander the Alliance had ever seen. The early campaigns against the Empire started in 2 BBY. Ram Koda was tired of waiting for the orders from Mon Mothma, so he used his own commando unit to strike blows against the Empire with Juno Eclipse. Things went well for him until a raid on Cato Nemoidia, where he was ambushed and forced into gladiatorial combat. Due to that, Juno was suspended from active duty. She enlisted the help of Gael Akbar to make a mission to the planet of Dak in order to make an attempt to galvanize the citizens into rebellion and bring the shipyards of the Calamari sector into rebel control. The mission was a success, absolutely humiliating a very cocky Tarkin in the process. This united the Mon Calamari and Quarren people against the Empire, paving the way for their eventual revolt. A few months later, the leaders of the rebellion crafted their first plan, Operation Domino. The objective was to take out Imperial garrisons with sector forces and then dig in behind their planetary shields. Then it would inspire the local populace to do the same and revolt. This ended terribly. All the sector forces were ill-equipped and weren't efficient enough to achieve anything. Anytime a revolt popped up, the Empire put it down faster than you could say Baby Yoda. As bad as this all may sound, Operation Domino did have some positive long-term effects for the rebellion, such as the liberation of Dak and the Mon Calamari Council declaring neutrality in the war, which basically meant that they sided with the rebellion. Mon Calamari would become an essential source of ships and supplies for the rebellion. The complete failure of Operation Domino made Mon Mothma realize that the rebellion couldn't fight the Empire head-on. This made the Alliance develop some hit-and-run strategies against the Empire, leading to some decisive victories for the Alliance. Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts were made by Leia Organa on the Tantive 4. As the rebellion's influence increased, so did the Empire's hunt for them. Imperials began to wipe out entire sectors that may or may not have had rebel activity. This included the subjugation of Sulan, which resulted in the death of Morgan Katarn, father of Kyle Katarn, and the Battle of AX-456 that resulted in the death of 436 rebellion soldiers. A pivotal moment in the war occurred when the Empire attempted to nationalize the Incom Corporation, a starfighter manufacturing company. This led the rebels into the Frisian campaign, which was aimed at stealing the X-Wing prototypes in hopes of eventually mass-producing the starfighters for use against the Empire. The rebels were successful on their assault on Frisia, which gave them access to the ship's prototypes. With their newly attained X-Wings, Gael Akbar led the charge in the Battle of Turkana, in which the rebels had an overwhelming victory over the surprised Imperials, thanks to their new starfighters. Although, now the Empire was pissed and retaliated with Operation Strike Fear. Its primary objective was to suppress rebel opposition in the Tian hegemony. The operation was short-lived when the rebels were able to capture an Imperial convoy, and with the help of the Celestin resistance, the Empire drew back from the Tian cluster. In the aftermath of the campaigns, Akbar returned to the Calamari sector to help rebuild their fleet. Alliance Command soon began their efforts in creating the B-Wing starfighters, as well as the mass production of X-Wings thanks to the rescue of the Incom design team. This gave the Alliance a huge advantage with their navy, making the Empire unable to compete in the air for some time. In 0 BBY, the Death Star was finally finished. The Tarkin Doctrine was in full effect, with Imperials killing civilians left and right, and Tarkin was promoted to Grand Moff for his good work. Since the Death Star was fully up and running, Palpatine dissolved the Imperial Senate, making the Death Star the main source of Imperial control in the Outer Rim. Thankfully for the Alliance, however, the Death Star did not make everyone cower in fear as the Empire expected, but instead rallied more planets and people to join the rebel cause. The creation of the Death Star made Imperial Moff Kalast defect to the Alliance, slipping some information on the Death Star to Bothan spies. Vader found out about this and chased him down through several battles with the rebellion, specifically 2 battles at Adzeri, in which the Moff escaped again. Vader was so furious about this that he dispatched his own separate task force to track him down. The Alliance tried to protect him, but the Empire eventually captured the Moff. He was executed by Palpatine after telling about his dealings with the Bothans. Palpatine then took a little ship down to Bothaweu and electrocuted a bunch of Bothans as punishment. Next up was the Alliance's Operation Skyhook. It was one of the largest operations in the history of the war, aimed at acquiring a complete set of Death Star plans so the Alliance could locate a way to destroy it. The complete plans were over on Tropawa, which was secured by Vader and his reinforcements. Tropawa rebels hijacked the Imperial Communications Center and beamed the plans to the Tantive 4. The rebels were overrun, and the Tantive was chased down by the Devastator. With the Imperial destroyer close behind, Leia, on board the Tantive 4, attempted to enlist the help of Obi-Wan Kenobi and headed for Tatooine. The Imperials raided the ship and took Leia captive. On board the Death Star, Tarkin wanted to show the power of the space station, in which he asked the captive Leia, where is the rebel base? And she tells him Dantooine, because screw Dantooine, I guess. Screw the old Jedi Enclave and all the innocent farmers. But Tarkin thought it was too remote, so he just blew up her home planet instead, and ordered her execution. He did send some stormtroopers to Dantooine just to be sure. Not the best day for Leia. Thankfully, she was rescued by Skywalker, Solo, and the late Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then retreated to Yavin 4 to begin an assault on the Death Star. But with their retreat, Tarkin had a homing beacon attached to the Millennium Falcon, Solo's ship, which led the Empire directly to the rebel base on Yavin 4. With the Death Star plans in hand, the Alliance was able to exploit a weakness on the Death Star. After a deadly space battle, the rebels destroyed the Death Star, as well as the powerful Grand Moff Tarkin. The shot was, quote, 1 in a million, made by Luke Skywalker himself, by channeling the Force and the sacrifice of many rebel fighter pilots. This battle was one of the largest turning points of the war, giving the Alliance credibility as a legitimate military threat to the Empire. Although, this victory was pretty short-lived, because now the Empire was pissed and knew exactly where the rebel base was, so evacuations from Yavin 4 started immediately following the battle. To the rebels' advantage, the Empire couldn't really do anything to stop their evacuation either. The Empire didn't have enough free ships to send to Yavin, and committing too many ships would evolve into the rebels making major strikes somewhere else. Due to the small amount of ships blockading Yavin, Skywalker and some of the other pilots were able to slip through the defenses and begin scouting for another base. He had a little accident with a comet, which led him to stumble upon the ice world of Hoth. He reported to Alliance Command that it would be a great place for the new Alliance base. The Empire soon got fed up with the blockade and descended upon the planet of Yavin, which resulted in several bloody skirmishes where many Alliance commanders were killed. In order to help the evacuation efforts, Admiral Ackbar came in clutch and just started assaulting nearby Imperial planets to force the Imperial Navy to divert their forces to Ackbar instead. However, the Empire managed to cut off the tertiary Fezway and Fezway Minor routes, forcing the rebels to make a risky escape around the unstable star of Fezway Prime. They got help from Luke Skywalker's guidance through the Force. The nearby Star Destroyers rushed to engage but ended up slamming into Vader's Devastator when he tried to intercept. During the confusion, the Alliance was able to finish their escape. With the Alliance on the run, Darth Vader got very angry and murdered some people in the meantime. He went out and killed a lot of guys that had some interactions with the rebels. Guy named Gorn was going to defect to the Alliance and give the rebels some grain. He killed him. He was suspicious of this governor guy. He killed him too and installed a new governor. Meanwhile, the rebellion had some drama in their upper ranks between Mon Mothma and Garm Bell, the now most senior figures in the Rebel Alliance, which resulted in Mothma dismissing Bell over an attack on Milvain. This was followed by the disaster at Deep Space Besh, where Vader tried to end the Civil War in one decisive battle. The rebellion was ambushed and lost many of their fleet, barely escaping into hyperspace in time. It was a terrible defeat for the rebellion that almost cost them the war, but with it came some positives that ultimately helped them win in the long run. The first being the commitment of the Bothan spy net to the rebellion, and the second, the Mon Calamari officially entering the war on the side of the Alliance thanks to the persuasion of our good friend Admiral Ackbar. After the failure at Deep Space Besh, the Alliance continued with their guerrilla strikes on the Empire over the next year. This included Operation Ram's Head, which resulted in the destruction of 4 Star Destroyers while they were docked. Aside from these strikes here and there, the Alliance remained pretty scattered. After Yavin, both sides took some time to reorganize. The Empire started the Dark Trooper Project, which was immediately shut down by Kyle Katarn and Jan Ors after Mon Mothma was like, go shut that crap down. The Alliance formed Renegade Squadron, a military unit of pirates, smugglers, and other galactic oddballs created by Han Solo, as well as the Rogue Squadron, created by Luke Skywalker and Wedge Antilles, which consisted of some of the galaxy's best pilots, ultimately giving them a larger-than-life perception from the eye of citizens. Soon Alliance Command listened to Skywalker and established Echo Base on Hoth for its secludedness and quick access to the Corellian trade spine. Although, after the close call at Yavin 4, there was a permanent state of readiness for evacuation. During the suppression of an uprising on Zaloris, Imperials gathered Zaloran archives and analyzed them, gathering that the new rebel base was located in the vicinity of Elrud. With this wonderful new information, the Empire decided to create Death Squadron to find the exact location of the base. Death Squadron traveled along the Outer Rim, interrogating smugglers for information. Eventually, it was discovered that the rebels had chosen a cold, barren ice ice planet for their base, in which the Empire sent thousands of probe droids to find the planet, and they did. Luckily, when approaching the planet, Admiral Kendall Ozzel of the Death Squadron screwed up by coming out of hyperspace so close to the Hoth system that the rebels erected a planetary shield upon their approach. Vader ordered a Walker assault formation to destroy the shield generator instead, since they no longer could bomb the base from orbit. The Walker assault was incredibly successful, and the battle was a major loss for the Alliance. Luckily, the Falcon escaped carrying Leia, Han, Chewbacca, and the droids where they could seek asylum with Han's old friend, Lando Calrissian. But the Empire forced Calrissian into cooperating with them in an attempt to capture the Falcon's crew. With the help of Boba Fett, Vader and his troops captured the rebels and set a trap for Skywalker, who was away on the planet of Dagobah with Yoda. Oh, and Han Solo got mad at Darth Vader's nice meal that was prepared for him, in which Han gets frozen in carbonite and Luke loses his hand. The Battle of Hoth was such a major defeat for the Rebel Alliance, even some members of the 501st Legion thought they had ended the war. Alliance command stayed intact, but more disasters came toward the Alliance. The first being Task Force Vengeance, which resulted in a stalemate, followed by the Battle of Gaul, a small unsuccessful campaign to rescue Han Solo. During this time, the rebels did have some positives, such as Rogue Squadron's rescue mission in the Maw system, which saved rebel captives from the Battle of Hoth, and another rescue mission in Balkura, which resulted in the destruction of the Imperial Star Dreadnought. Following the destruction of the first Death Star, Palpatine ordered a new one built. This one was much bigger, with no thermal exhaust port, and would essentially be invincible upon completion. Another planet was needed for the construction of the battle station. Bren Tantor, an Imperial general, chose Endor for its isolation. He and his troops went down there, slaughtered some Ewoks, and created the shield generator for the Death Star too. Since Yavin, the war had been a disaster for the Alliance. Even a year after Hoth, the rebels were still trying to regroup. Palpatine intentionally leaked information about the second Death Star in hopes of drawing in Admiral Akbar's fleet and taking out the rebellion once and for all. The Empire was prepared, and Death Squadron was sent to Endor to await the rebel attack. At the same time, the Empire assembled massive invasion fleets on the borders of Mon Calamari space in Mon Mothma's homeworld of Chandrila. Palpatine's plan was wipe out Admiral Akbar's fleet, then immediately move the Death Star to Chandrila and Mon Class, then end the war. But the rebels were ready to risk it all and put everything on the line. Rebel generals Han Solo, who by the way got saved from carbonite, Chewbacca, Leia Organa, and Luke Skywalker led an expedition to disable the shield on Endor so the attack could commence. Skywalker turned himself into Vader in hopes of rescuing him from the dark side. Vader took Skywalker to the second Death Star, where Skywalker defeated Vader, but didn't kill him, allowing for Vader to redeem himself and kill Palpatine. Although it's important to note that Palpatine's ghost survived and fled to the Deep Core. Skywalker escaped with the body of his father, and with the planetary shields down, the rebels were able to assault the second Death Star and destroy it again, marking a tremendous rebel victory and killing countless Imperial officers in the destruction. Following the Alliance's victory, riots and uprisings began on many Imperial-controlled worlds as news spread across the galaxy. To crack back at citizens, Imperial authorities gave full power to local military forces to end uprisings and restore order. The death toll became horrendous, and Grand Vizier Said Pestage assumed the title of Galactic Emperor and established control over Coruscant. Wary of further rebel strikes against key targets, Said Pestage and the ruling council adopted a fortress world strategy, fortifying key systems. This turned many of the Moffs and generals into warlords after they fortified their own home systems. The Alliance, now called the Alliance of Free Planets, was largely unopposed. Wary of reunifying the disintegrating empire, the Alliance of Free Planets opted for diplomacy over military action to win over sectors, leading many planets to join their cause, such as Bathaweu, Dak, and Kashyyyk. Mon Mothma also gave the planet's security forces back to each sector with the defense declarations. This caused some infighting in the galaxy with those in versus opposed, but overall went over generally well. But just as things started looking okay for the Alliance, trouble arrived. Within 24 hours after the Battle of Endor, an Imperial embassy droid ship arrived to the Forest Moon carrying a message that an Imperial outpost in Balkura was under attack by an unknown species from the unknown regions. Since the Emperor was killed, there weren't really any spare troops to send to the outpost, so the Alliance decided to go and check it out themselves. Upon arriving, they discovered that the mysterious species was the Siruk, who practiced entrenchment, which involved transferring the life energies of a captive into a battle droid, starship, or computer. While there, the rebels signed a truce with a local Imperial garrison to help stop the Siruvi. Of course, the truce was very quickly broken once the Siruvi were defeated, with the Imperials firing on rebel flagships immediately following the Surivi surrender. Both the Surivi and the Imperials were defeated. The Alliance decided to call it the Balkura Incident, as to mask the knowledge of this unknown species to the rest of the galaxy. This did have some benefits for the Alliance, besides the victory, mainly the joining of the Valkyria into the alliance. Following the sea route came the Nagai, who were fleeing from a nearby galaxy and invaded the galaxy's southern quadrant. They were fleeing from another race called the Tophs, who subjugated the Nagai for centuries and were pursuing them. Once they established a base at Seijo, the Nagai, Alliance, Zeltrons, and some Mandalorians were able to defeat them as a joint force, leaving the Nagai to return and reclaim their homeworld. When the invasion was stopped, the Alliance decided to pat themselves on the back by reorganizing into the New Republic. They offered the Nagai Seijo, but most of them left anyway to take back their homeworld from the Tophs. The declaration of the New Republic was to replace the Empire. The document was signed by Mon Mothma, Admiral Akbar, Leia Organa, and others that made up the newly formed New Republic Provisional Council. With the Nagai and Tophs gone, the citizens of the galaxy were relieved to see that the New Republic could defend the galaxy. The previous encounter with the Nagai spread their forces very thin, so the New Republic waited a little before they wiped out the Empire. In the meantime, the New Republic won over many planets with diplomacy, and the news of Palpatine's death encouraged them more. The Empire was also in very bad shape at this time. The Defense Declaration split them up pretty badly, and many Imperial leaders were too busy warlording to actually organize anything outside of their own territories. One of the New Republic's first engagements was the liberation of Bespin under General Calrissian, while Akbar's Third Fleet moved to liberate Kashyyyk. Following that was the Battle of Brentel IV, a propaganda struggle for the Republic and the Empire. Both sides were battling to persuade the core worlds in who was the more powerful and respected authority. With the Republic winning, things weren't looking good for the Sate Pestage of the Imperial Army, and his position on Coruscant began collapsing. He then secretly contacted Leia Organa in hopes to exchange Coruscant for immunity, but Isan Isard found out about his plan, leading to a warrant for his arrest. Pestage flew to the planet of Seutrek, where he was imprisoned by a local governor. Admiral Delek Krenel was sent to retrieve him, but murdered him instead. With Sate Pestage out of the way, Isard assassinated all three members of the Triumvirate, which was appointed by the Cabals at the time of Sate Pestage's treason, making herself Empress of the Empire! And she got to work quick by bombing the Hast shipyards in 4 ABY, destroying dozens of warships and thousands of personnel, setting the New Republic's plans back years. A lengthy campaign then occurred during a 3-month time span on the planet Milagro, which was an important hyperroute junction containing large-scale manufacturing facilities. The New Republic assaulted the planet for 3 months until Imperial forces withdrew. Before they withdrew, the Imperial forces initiated a base Delta Zero operation that destroyed absolutely anything of worth on the planet. But hey, Luke Skywalker got promoted to general. The New Republic also got some help from the Staxes that were murdering Imperials left and right during the Stenix massacres. They literally killed millions of people. When those millions of people stopped being the Imperials, Akbar moved his fleet to wipe them out at Tharkos, ending their entire invasion. Next came one of the craziest and stupidest things to come out of the Galactic Civil War, the Trioculus affair. The Central Committee of Grand Moffs attempted to pass off the three-eyed mutant human Trioculus as Emperor Palpatine's illegitimate son in an effort to take away power from Empress Isan Isard. Leia was ultimately captured by Trioculus because he had a crush on her and was going to force her to marry him. So the New Republic made a robot called Leia 2, in which they swapped the real Leia 4. And then at the wedding, Leia 2 shot freaking lasers out of her eyes and killed Trioculus. Absolutely wacky. Following the fun-filled Leia murder robot came one of the Galactic Civil War's bloodiest battles, the Battle of Mindor. Once Palpatine was killed, many of the surviving royal guards joined forces with Kronel, or Lord Shadowspawn. They held territory in the Inner Rim and used Mindor as their main base. Their army consisted of many of the deadly Shadow Stormtroopers, where they committed acts of terrorism against the New Republic. He kidnapped many people, as well as essentially brainwashed them into serving under him. The now General Luke Skywalker launched the campaign against his Inner Rim territories, which left thousands dead. The progress was slow, but eventually effective. When things started looking bad for Kronel, his army began suicide runs until Skywalker was ultimately able to defeat him. But with his defeat came the immediate death of some 50,000 Imperial personnel he had control over, all innocent pawns to do Kronel's bidding. This was a bit heavy and traumatic for Skywalker, so he resigned from the New Republic army and began concentrating on the restoration of the Jedi Order. In 6 ABY, the New Republic consolidated its holdings things. They had a slight morale boost with victories during the short-lived Delvardas campaign. The western reaches became entirely secure, and the Alliance began to encroach on the core, bringing them to Coruscant. The New Republic knew that Coruscant was incredibly important, being that it was the most densely populated powerhouse in the galaxy. Having control of Coruscant would massively increase their legitimacy. The New Republic began a campaign with hopes of isolating Coruscant by working around the nearby planets of Borlaus and Talasy. The first Battle of Borlaus was a disaster due to a much stronger deflector shield on Coruscant, making any sort of bombardment useless. The New Republic was able to take it during the second battle and then run a ground assault team on Coruscant's surface to disable the planetary shield. Wedge Antilles and Rogue Squadron were sent undercover into Imperial City to sabotage the shield generator. Then Admiral Akbar's fleet moved in, and the New Republic was able to overtake the core world due to the few troops stationed at the capital, for they certainly were not expecting the entire Republic fleet. Isard was not found in the palace, for she had escaped and unleashed the Krytos virus, which was affecting alien species on the planet as a last-ditch effort to undermine the New Republic's leadership. Isard had fled to the Bacta-producing world of Thyfera. She supported a coup and became head of state, allowing her to control the Bacta supply and not allow the New Republic access to medical aid. The virus itself was highly contagious, and once infected, it would destroy the infected host body cell by cell until the victim's flesh fell apart completely. It spread through physical contact and water, but not the air. It was an incredibly agonizingly painful death. It was designed to only target non-human populations, thanks to the Empire's humanocentric policies, and could only be treated by large amounts of Bacta. To stop the Krytos virus, the New Republic found itself in a double bind, considering they couldn't just take out an elected official. So Wedge Antilles, quote, resigned from the New Republic and started a private war against Isard. At the Battle of Thyfera, Isard's ship was crippled and her escape shuttle destroyed. She engineered the incident to cover her tracks, where she went into hiding until the Thrawn campaign. Wedge and his team returned to the New Republic shortly after the Bacta War, and the Krytos virus was stopped now that there was access to Bacta. Between Imperial space and the Greater Meldrud was Jin's empire, which stretched along the Hydean Way from the Inner Rim to the Corporate Sector. He had a great mustache, as well as a powerful military, including the elite stormtroopers, the Raptors. He was the Imperial's best chance of any sort of resurgence. The New Republic began to chip away at his territories, and fellow Imperial warlords began to lose faith in him. It also didn't help that he attacked Kuwait, which was still an Imperial loyalist world. Jin's empire was not looking good in the eyes of the rest of the Imperials, so much that the New Republic teamed up with Admiral Terran Rogris to wipe out his empire once and for all. At the Battle of Dathomir, the New Republic won, and Jin was killed by Han Solo. Han was so happy that he shortly soon after married Leia Organa. Jin's death had widespread repercussion. The biggest threat to the New Republic was now gone, and the Empire could now focus on only the New Republic. Many Imperial warlords also claimed various sections of Jin's forces now that they had no direction. Free real estate. The New Republic also took Kuwait, although there were still many Imperial partisans on the planet, and the shipyards were heavily damaged. Within a year of Jin's defeat, the New Republic had everything much more stable in the galaxy, now that it was in control of 3/4 of it. The stage was now set for the next great conflict, and the re-emergence of everybody's favorite, Thrawn. Soon after, Anaxes, the defender of the core, and the site of the Navy War College, surrendered to the New Republic, badly damaging the Imperial's chances of reconquest. Loyalists now had to rely on training new recruits on the job, and conscription for the Imperial army was inevitable. By the end of 8 ABY, Mon Mothma ordered a suspension of New Republic operations in order to rebuild its forces. With this, the Empire retained some of their ground beyond the Hydean Way in the new territories. 2 years after the capture of Coruscant, the New Republic heard reports of Grand Admiral Thrawn commanding the Imperial fleet, or Mithramarunduo. He had returned from the unknown regions, taking control of the Galactic Empire, and was now starting a campaign against the New Republic. Thrawn's first order of business was at Wayland, where he discovered how to clone an army in a matter of days by counteracting, quote, clone madness, which happens when clones are made in less than a year. Then he attacked the shipyards at Sluis Van, attempting to steal some of the ships docked there, while also planting incriminating data against Admiral Akbar of conspiring with the Empire. This would have Akbar removed from office and create a stall in the Senate, stalling a response to Thrawn's invasion. Thrawn simultaneously sent some Nogri commando units to capture Leia. They failed at Kashyyyk, where the New Republic was able to capture a commando. Leia traveled to their home homeworld of Honoghr and expose the Imperial's attempts to keep the planet's environment damaged, leading the Noghri to join the New Republic. Thrawn's plan for a fleet was to locate the Katana fleet, which was a 200-ship-strong force that was lost before the Clone Wars. Luke Skywalker and Han Solo attempted to capture it with a small Republic force, but the Imperial forces had already taken most of the dreadnoughts. The battle that ensued showed that Thrawn was using a clone facility to create his army, in which the New Republic's priorities quickly shifted to stopping the clone facility from producing more clones. With Thrawn in control of the Katana fleet, the balance of war was now in the Imperial's favor. Many Republic planets were under siege. The New Republic had to adopt a fortress world strategy to protect their core systems. Luke Skywalker went on the hunt for the cloning facility, finding some vital information through former Emperor's hand, Mara Jade. Once Wayland was discovered by the New Republic, Skywalker, Solo, Calrissian, and Jade led an expedition with the Noghri that destroyed the cloning facility. Aided by the Smugglers Alliance, the New Republic and Thrawn had their pinnacle head-to-head at the Battle of Belbringi. Once the Republic had breached the shipyard, Thrawn was killed by his bodyguard Rook, after an intercom stated that the cloning facility was under attack by Skywalker and fellow Noghri. Gilad Pellaeon, Thrawn's second-in-command, ordered a retreat with Thrawn's death, making him the leader of the Imperial forces. With Thrawn dead, the New Republic showed local warlords who's boss. Akbar occupied Orinda, where the Imperial ruling council lied, and Rogue Squadron was able to kill Dalek Krennel in the Seertrick hegemony. Meanwhile, Palpatine had been gathering his forces and his body together for nearly a decade, and now it was time to strike. Thrawn made it far too easy for the warlords under Palpatine as the Imperial fleet began to strike at the lightly defended galactic core. After a small campaign, the Imperial army was able to retake the former capital at the Second Battle of Coruscant, making the New Republic's government flee to Dasucha. With Coruscant in their control, the Imperial ruling council attempted to assemble a new senate that would serve the Emperor, but it only caused more infighting, political disagreements, and assassinations within the Imperial ranks. This led to what was known as the Imperial Civil War, where armed conflicts broke out against Imperial warlords grasping for power. It only ended when Emperor Palpatine was fully reborn and returned. Many warlords returned to loyal service, while other warlords fled for their lives in fear of what Palpatine would do to them for messing around with his power. Palpatine was back and ready to kick some butt. With Palpatine back from the dead, he began launching Operation Shadowhand. The Empire now had world-class dreadnoughts and new weaponry, and attacked many Republic key planets, like the temporary capital world of Dak. Luke and Leia fought the Emperor and were able to defeat him over the moon of Dasucha 5 by turning his Force Storm against himself, destroying both him and his flagship, the Eclipse. But then Palpatine was reborn again in another clone body a year later. This time, the New Republic decided to attack the Emperor's throne planet of Biss. The battle involved Republic Viper droids and Sith-mutated Rancors. The Republic was overrun and had to retreat, and in retaliation, Palpatine blew up the planet of Dasucha 5 with his brand new toy, the Galaxy Gun. This gun was used continuously to force planets into Imperial submission, much like the OG Death Star. But Palpatine was becoming so powerful that his mind started to deteriorate. After consulting with the spirits of the Sith, Palpatine was informed to enter the body of Leia Organa Solo's newest son, Anakin. Palpatine attempted to capture Anakin by traveling to the surface of Onderon. While on the surface, Lando hijacked his flagship, the Eclipse 2, and set it for the same coordinates as the Galaxy Gun, destroying both when leaving hyperspace. Meanwhile, Palpatine battled with Leia over Anakin. Other Jedi came to help, including Luke, but it was Han that just came in and shot Palpatine in the back easy peasy. As his last clone body died, his spirit flew towards Anakin Solo's body, but the fatally wounded Emperor Geos Brand jumped in front of the baby, dragging Palpatine's spirit down into the depths of the Force, destroying him once and for all. Once Palpatine died again, the New Republic reoccupied the core, and the Empire fell right back into infighting. They announced plans to rebuild the surface of Coruscant that was in total wreckage from the Imperial Civil War, although there was a small group of the Empire that was the true vestige of the original Galactic Empire called the Crimson Empire. They ruled a strip of space in the Outer Rim after relocating to Ord Cantrell after the fall of the Empire. They established the Council of Blood, and Carnor Jax proclaimed himself head of the Council and Emperor. Jax was actually sort of progressive, considering he had alien members on the Council. Imperials don't do that. They're racist towards aliens. He had the backing of the Diasta family, which gave him access to the galaxy's largest private fleet. They faced New Republic attack right away. Jax panicked after a loss at Feta and had his stormtroopers kill the remaining royal guards to protect his rule. One guard named Kurkanos escaped and was hunted by Jax. Jax tracked him down on Yinkor, where they dueled. Kanos won, and then killed Xandal Caravis, who disbanded the council and tried to rule as emperor alone once Jax had died. Then, Kanos disbanded the council, ultimately collapsing any real imperial authority. Now the Imperials went back to being warlords for some time, because that's what they were good at this point, I guess, carving out allegiances with some of the core planets. The New Republic didn't even attack their fortress worlds, suspecting that the lack of trade would force their surrender. Even Gilad Pelion, longtime Imperial lead and now Vice Admiral, didn't have much hope. He attempted to just keep things stable and took his task force into the Deep Core to join Trudent Teradoc, who had the largest fleet. Admiral Natasi Dalla came back from the Maw after years of seclusion from orders of Tarkin, only to find the Empire in pieces. She got so pissed that she attacked the New Republic with only 3 Star Destroyers on Dak and Dantooine, then retreated because, well, she only had 3 Star Destroyers. Nice. The New Republic had a few hurdles during this time too. Admiral Akbar resigned after a disgraced crash that destroyed the Cathedral of Winds and killed countless Vors, which are just bird guys. Anakin Solo was almost kidnapped. Again, Mon Mothma got poisoned, a student of Skywalker's Academy was driven to the dark side, stole a superweapon, killed billions of innocent people with it, so yeah, maybe it was a little worse for the New Republic. It ended up ruining Dalla's campaign because it destroyed the entire Cauldron Nebula. But then, he felt bad about it and rejoined the New Republic in helping destroy the superweapon and Dalla's fleet, although he still killed billions of innocent people. Dalla retreated to the Deep Core and didn't exactly get along with the warlords and found an ally in Gilad Pelion. She had a plan to reunite the Empire and forced the 13 warlords to meet at Toss Beacon to reunite the Empire in 12 ABY. But the warlords couldn't agree on anything, so she just poisoned all of them and proclaimed herself Supreme Commander of the Imperial Fleet and made Pelion second in command. She was also pretty ahead of her time for Imperials and ended decades of oppression against women and non-humans in the military. Dalla's new United Imperial Army suffered a terrible loss at Yavin 4. It was so bad, it made her resign and give the Supreme Commander of the Empire in full Admiral position to Pelion. Pelion then decided to establish the Empire by connecting fortress worlds in the Northern Rim after the disastrous campaign. Pelion encouraged many Moffs in these territories to join his, quote, true empire, and many did, remembering that Pelion was second in command during the good old Thrawn days. The Council of Moffs was formed and they became the official Imperial Remnant, although the Moffs still refer to themselves as the Galactic Empire because they didn't want to let that one down. 6 months after Dalla resigned, Pelion decided to conquest the planet Orinda in the Mid-Rim, one of the New Republic's proudest trade world holdings outside the core. The planet had been lost since the Thrawn campaign, and Pelion wanted to show that this Imperial dog still had some bite to it. When the Empire was successful, Pelion offered terms to the Republic, stating that he had captured a planet of cultural importance to the Empire, and offered mutual recognition of borders in exchange for a cease in hostilities. But the New Republic was panicking because Pelion had Star Dreadnoughts and saw it as an attempt to invade the core worlds, so they sent a fleet to attack. Hence, the Orinda campaign ensued, and the New Republic was unable to regain control of the planet due to political disagreements over starfighters. The Orinda campaign secured the Imperial Remnant's southern border for another 5 years. After Orinda, both sides took the time to fortify their acquisitions. The Republic eventually started in toward the Borderlands region, forcing Pelion to take an offensive strategy by the Moffs. Pelion was uncertain about it, but the Imperial Remnant launched a few attacks on Lukaszek and Barrison, which were successful. But soon the New Republic pushed them back, ultimately destroying Pelion's flagship, the Reaper, at the Battle of Selenot. After the defeat, Pelion took defensive measures and sought to build a functioning state on New Order principles, while the Republic didn't press the advantage, but focused on commerce to promote peace. And this was actually effective, making the next 5 years relatively peaceful between the two factions. But in 14 ABY came Lord Hethrear's Empire Reborn movement, which was separate from Pelion's empire. Hethrear had been a student of Vader, and was powered by the mysterious Waru, a sentient Force-sensitive creature that gave Hethrear absolute power over the Force. Their first attack was on the Yavin Praxium, but turned disastrous for the Reborn as Kyle Katarn boarded the Reborn's flagship Doomgiver and killed Chief Lieutenant Gallic Fire, and after Rogue Squadron destroyed the ship, Chief Lieutenant Desan was killed by Katarn too. This crippled the Empire Reborn, but Hethrear wasn't going to give up yet. He kidnapped Han and Leia's children, while they were on a diplomatic mission. Leia, Chewie, and Ralau tracked them through the Force, leading them to Crush Station. They investigated the Waru, leading Skywalker's Force ability to be crippled as the Waru took to him. Leia and Chewie rescued Jason and Jaina on Hethrear's Worldcraft Rebirth, but Hethrear made away with Anakin. They met up with Luke and Han at Crush Station as Hethrear planned on relaunching the Empire Reborn by sacrificing Anakin to the Waru. Poor kid can never catch a break. Luke, affected by the nearby crystallizing star, dove into the altar in Anakin's place, but was ultimately saved by Ralau, launching herself at Hethrear in a furious attack. Enraged by the missed opportunity and Hethrear's failure to fulfill his bargain, the Waru consumed Hethrear instead, ending the Empire Reborn and killing Hethrear. Next came the final campaigns of the war. In 13 ABY, the Imperial Remnant almost had another civil war with the appearance of the hyper-conservative Restored Empire. It didn't get very far and was ended fairly quickly by the Remnant. 14 ABY saw the Disciples of Ragnos Crisis, in which the New Republic had to deal with the Dark Jedi Tavion attempting to resurrect the ancient Sith Ragnos on Korriban, in which she was defeated. In 17 ABY, two former Jedis at the Yavin Praxium planted bombs and droids to kill entire planetary populations, with the aim of using their terrorism to take control of the Republic. They even bombed the Senate Hall on Coruscant. They were eventually defeated at the Battle of Almania, but it drove Leia to leave her position in office. When the New Republic was rebuilding, the Moffs of the Imperial Remnant thought it would be a good time to strike. In 17 ABY, the New Republic also lifted its ban on former Imperial officials holding elective office as a peace offering, but the Moffs saw it as a prelude to invasion for some reason. The Moffs wanted to attack the New Republic once again, but Pellaeon didn't like the idea. He figured, I'll strike a few planets, get a few victories in, then we might as well just offer a peace treaty. What followed was the biggest disaster for the Imperial Remnant yet. Not only did they not make any progress in their invasion, they lost territory. By the end of the campaign, they only had 8 sectors in the Outer Rim left. They were essentially an overlooked backwater. The last event of the war was one that almost tore the New Republic in half, and that was the Caamas Document Crisis. Pellaeon declared to his Moffs that the Empire had lost the war and made clear that he wanted to discuss peace terms with the Republic. Instead, the Moffs wanted one last campaign by making one of the guys wear blue skin dye and red contact lenses to make it look like Thrawn came back from the dead. Not kidding. They brought forth the Caamas Document, an old document depicting a list of Bothans that helped the Empire a generation prior in the destruction of Caamas. Since Bothans had continually been supported by the Alliance as allies, it disrupted relations between those in support of the Bothans and those against them, leaving the New Republic on the verge of a civil war. Thrawn was back, people were taking sides in the New Republic was panicking, planets started redeclaring to the Empire, it was a total mess. Ultimately, the New Republic was able to determine the Imperial copy forged and gained access to the original through a mission with Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade on Nurawan. Although on that mission, they did find a clone version of Thrawn being made, but it got destroyed in a flood when a fight ensued with the guard droids. Pellaeon called out the fake Thrawn and stopped the situation from escalating. With the original copy, the New Republic was able to de-escalate tensions with the Bothan people and expose the Imperial Remnant as provocators. The crisis was defused. And by this point, Pellaeon had had enough. He was old. He was tired. He was just tired. And at last, the New Republic and Imperial Remnant began peace negotiations. Where, you may ask? Well, at the hologram table of the Millennium Falcon. It was signed by Imperial Remnant's Supreme Commander of the Imperial Fleet, Fleet Admiral Gilad Pellaeon, and the New Republic's Acting Chief of State, Ponk Gavriso, in 19 ABY, making the formal end of the Galactic Civil War. It left what remained of what little the Empire had left, but ended hostilities between the two sides. It opened up the Remnant for both trade and commerce, and put limitations on smuggling that both sides could enforce. And with this, the Galactic Civil War was finally over. Hooray! Well, I hope you've enjoyed the timeline. It was surely a lot to get through, but after a 22-year war, there's so much content. It really goes to show how a bunch of little things can add up into something monstrous. Although seemingly insignificant at first, each battle was a significant stepping stone for the Alliance that ultimately created a domino effect into the demise of the Empire. Each piece in the puzzle was crucial to the overall picture of the New Republic victory. It also takes a long time to take over a galaxy. I mean, look at that. That's absolutely huge. At least that was the end of it all, and there wasn't any more. Oh God, no!